Has there been a moment when you realized or decided that you would like to redirect your skills from upholding the status quo to tackling the climate crisis?
BBDO was one of my top 3 agencies when I moved to New York. So it feels good to finally be here and made it. The highest level of leadership and creative minds are here. The marketing and advertising industry is predicted to spend $1.7 trillion worldwide in ad spend just this year, in 1 year. And that's up from 8% last year. New York claims to be the mecca of advertising, and no one's talking about climate. It didn't make any sense to me. It's the first group in New York to provide a space for strategists working in advertising that want to come together and connect. They want to vent. I think that's a really big thing we've seen in these. And ideate to try to figure out what we can do about this together. The advertising industry has such a powerful role because we yield the dollars and the influence behind it, because we're the ones shaping the demands and the behaviors of everyone.
Freya, welcome to the Shades of Life podcast.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolute pleasure to have you as well. I wanted to start this podcast by answering a question from a viewer who asked, why don't we focus the podcast on one topic in particular, like energy or waste, for example? So I just wanted to confirm, because it's going to link back to the discussion today. In this podcast, I invite guests to share out-of-the-box original approaches to how they are driving social change and climate action. And from the get-go, I decided to not limit ourselves to any industry, because I consider it essential to have a diverse approach and make people realize that everything and everyone is connected. And I do hope that for all the podcast episodes we will have, people will start making these links. So if I take a very simple example to illustrate this, if we take a plastic bottle that somebody buys today, we know it will end up polluting the ocean tomorrow. And it will come back at us with negative health impacts for us. For example, it has already been demonstrated by science, and we'll probably do a podcast about it one day. And to me, it's important for us to understand these connections and what we can do at every step to not damage our health, to not pollute the ocean, and probably to not buy that plastic bottle in the first place if we go backwards in the chain of events. And it's important to understand the chain of events. So that requires going back to the source, and perhaps one of the sources is the influence of advertising, which can incentivize us to buy the plastic bottle in the first place. And I'm citing advertising because today we are going to discuss the role of advertising with you, Freya, as it is the industry where you operate. And it has a massive role when we are talking of social change, climate action, because it's been decades that it is an industry that has been used not always for the best purposes, but it can be used for great purposes as well. As I say always, everything is a tool. It's really the intention that matters. So let's start by knowing more about you, because I love your background. So you have a very interesting life trajectory, as you were born in Dubai, but you grew up in New Zealand, very far from it. Then you worked in Milan, and you have now called New York City your home for the past decade. So that's quite acrobatic between all of these places in the world. So I wanted to ask you, how did these different geographical milestones happen for you? And would you say this diverse background has benefited you in both your personal life and your work life?
Yes. Before I speak about me, I want to say thank you for providing a platform for advertising and creative minds to even enter into this conversation. I think it's really important to have a seat at the table for us. And so thank you for providing this platform. And then about me, yes, it sounds like I've done a lot of acrobats bouncing around, but once I share my story, I hope it makes more sense. So I was born in a place actually called Ras Al Khaimah, which is one of the seven Emirates in United Arab Emirates. I say Dubai because it's an hour away and everyone knows where Dubai is. So Dubai is the glitz and glam, but Ras Al Khaimah is this very little oasis, seaside, mountains, very small town.
Okay.
And I was about 9 years old, and my parents wanted better education for us. And that is why I ended up in New Zealand.
Oh, wow. Well, that was a long way.
Yes, I spent the majority of my childhood living in between Ras Al Khaimah and Auckland, New Zealand. So I studied, I did all my education. I graduated from University of Auckland with 2 degrees, Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Commerce. And so both my business, knowledge and journalism background, I started working in advertising since day one. So I worked in Auckland, I worked in Dubai, I worked in Milan, and New York is like the mecca of advertising, right? So I knew I had to get myself here. And to answer the second part of the question, I think for sure this global, diverse background I'm very fortunate to have, all by happenstance, was an absolute superpower in landing a job in New York, especially in brand strategy, because that's what I do. You need to see, clients, businesses, and consumer problems all in a different light and put yourself in their shoes. So it's all about making sure that you have and bring different perspectives. So crucial, I think, in my career.
Yeah, that's really interesting to know you've always worked in advertising. I think that gives even more credentials to the conversation today. So talking of advertising, because that's what we are going to talk about, do you think we talk enough about advertising and its role when it comes to climate action in today's world? Because there is a lot of noise around other sectors, such as tech innovations. There is a lot happening there, for example. But what about the creative spaces? Do we give enough space to it?
Yeah, I would say zooming out for all the other sectors, right? To your point, I definitely believe we all need to find a way to make our job a climate job, right? No matter what you do. And similar to that, I'm in advertising. So I'm now tasking myself with figuring out how to make my job in advertising as a brand strategist a climate related job. And I definitely don't think that advertising and its role for climate action is talked about enough. And I think it's because people can't draw the connections. They see a lot of these facts and figures in isolation. So I love that you do have a belief for it. And I want to articulate, there's a lot of proof points. And I will walk through a very straightforward outline that I use to convince people that advertising is very, very important.
Yeah.
So I want to start off by very quickly acknowledging that the advertising and marketing operations does represent only 2 and 3% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. Okay. So it seems really, really small, but that's not where the power lies in what we do. The strength of what we do is found in the dollars and the influence and the behavior, something that you already mentioned. And I just want to add some facts and figures to make this something that you can't argue with. So the marketing and advertising industry is predicted to spend $1.7 trillion worldwide in ad spend just this year, in 1 year. And that's up from 8% last year. So the numbers have been growing. But just to think of, nearly $2 trillion, that's a lot of money. Which means most of the global population is swayed by the messages that they're seeing every day. Whether we like to believe it or not, subconsciously and consciously, we're exposed to this. And there was an amazing study done by The Drum, a publication last year, that said we were influenced by nearly 10,000 messages in a single day. So you can't argue with this. This is just the facts. And what is super interesting, two organizations, the Center of Climate Change and Social Transformations and the Climate Change Committee, based in the UK, are recommending that 60% of carbon emissions need to come from consumer behavior. So when we think about all that, I think it's a no-brainer that the advertising industry has such a powerful role because we yield the dollars and the influence behind it, because we're the ones shaping the demands and the behaviors of everyone.
Yeah, that's so impressive and impactful. And I love the figure you mentioned because it shows advertising is a big economy. I actually have in mind that the fashion industry, I think it is over $1 trillion. Advertising is more, and fashion is a big industry. So that's actually impressive. So thank you for that, Freya. So I invited you, Freya, because you started an incredible initiative as you are the founder of Climate Circles. Can you explain to us how it started, what it is, and what you aim to do with it?
Sure. So as I've said, I've been in advertising all my career, and I'm working on slowly changing the industry from within. But, you're navigating these bureaucracies. It's going to take a lot of time and patience and grit to get it done. And I needed an outlet right now. I was wondering, where are the other strategists? I can't be the only one sitting here in this industry. I think a lot of us got into the industry because we wanted to use our skills to do good. And I think we've all, become part of this machine and lost our way. And I'm still thinking about that. Where are the other people that are concerned, that care about it just as much as I do? So for that reason, I had to do something about it. And I searched and searched for organizations. I said, I can't be alone in this. After looking, there was a lot of organizations out of the UK. But when I looked to the US and specifically in New York, there was nothing.
But McCann, I think.
Unbelievable, because New York claims to be the Mecca of advertising, and no one's talking about climate. It didn't make any sense to me. And so after months of, ruminating and overthinking about what can I do, one weekend, I just sat down, I created the website. I had my best friend for encouragement, Alba, sitting next to me. And something that's really helpful, I think, to share for anyone else wanting to embark on this is, there's a lot of pressure when you start something to have your mission and vision and all of that figured out. For my first iteration of that website, I just put, if you're interested in wanting to chat climate, you're in advertising, come to this brunch. It was such a simple site. And I launched it during Climate Week last year. And it had an incredible amount of traction right away, which made me believe that it is a gap that people are looking to fill, just like me. So very quickly to articulate on what Climate Circles actually is. It's the first group in New York to provide a space for strategists working in advertising that want to come together and connect. They want to vent. I think that's a really big thing we've seen in these. And ideate to try to figure out what we can do about this together. So we host these intimate brunch gatherings every month, and we publish newsletters to sort of engage with this community. And we have a very, very simple goal, which is to unite strategists who want to chat climate because it's such a white space. And we're on a mission to not only normalize having these climate talk and conversations at your agencies, but the action piece of it. It's really important that the advertising industry can step up and take action and add a lot to this momentum and conversation.
Yeah, that's great. I'll just jump on 2 or 3 things you've said, because I always also try to use the wisdom of the guest to give advice. But I love the fact you said you started with a very simple website and then it develops and it evolves. It's certainly true for me too. I keep evolving things, and it should not stop you to start something. And whatever you start, it will keep evolving anyway, which is totally normal as you gain experience, you gain feedback, your own ideas evolve. Obviously, you gain more and more content. So that's really good to hear from you on this. I love that it started to resonate with people straight away as well. I think that's really great. So I wanted to ask you about the participants to these climate circles. Who are they? What is their usual profiles?
I would describe the climate circle attendees as a very passionate group of people. They really are the type of people that want to live and act on these beliefs in their personal and professional lives. And that happens to be, being better citizens of the planet. And it's usually they come from either big agencies like myself or very small independent agencies. And so we have a common understanding of what the processes and the systems and the bureaucracy is like. So the conversation is very much around the struggles, the frustration, the wins. We celebrate that too on their sustainability journey at their agencies. And it's just a really safe space. It's the advertising industry is notorious for the competitive nature, right? We're competing to win businesses and clients. But I really wanted to sort of put that aside for a second and have this higher order, right? Like climate change is our client for a second. Let's think about that. How can we come together in service of that instead of it being a brand? So I think people have gravitated towards wanting to come and chat openly and honestly about it. And the energy in the room, it's very intimate groups. You leave feeling so proud that these people and you're associating with them. It's great. We feed it off each other.
That's great. I really think because, things around climate change and also the interest probably from your clients, everything is moving at pace, I think. Just today, the interest is not what it was 3 years ago. It has definitely increased because the awareness is growing, the demand is growing. So obviously the clients are going to start moving in that direction as well. I find what you do really important from that perspective, because that means you and the strategist you meet with, you are preparing yourself more and more to answer this demand that's going to forcefully grow, or answering the challenges or the opportunities. And I think that's great. So I love the relaxed model you have created by hosting in-person brunch gatherings. I would definitely join them if I was in New York City.
Anytime, please.
Yeah, next time I come for sure. So New York is famous for its soirée concepts, delivering intimate and meticulously curated nights. I was wondering, was it the inspiration behind climate circles? And do you reckon that perhaps this more informal way of meeting helps in generating conversations, networking, etc.?
Yes, I think New York is very notorious for brunch, right? Brunch is like a very New York thing. And I truthfully did something that I would want to go to. It's just like me having brunch with my girlfriends every other week. It's exactly the same thing. It's a behavior that I'm tapping into that already exists. And so I think people feel very comfortable with the idea because it's very familiar. But I think the reason this informal space works so well is twofold: the quantity and quality. So the quantity, I always cap it at 7 people every month. It's only 7 people. And I think it's the ideal number that fosters conversation, because when one person is talking, everyone is listening. So we talk about the same topic as we move through. I think that has been really valuable. And everyone who comes has an opinion. They're wanting to share. And you can do so in that space. And then the quality of people, we thoroughly vet who comes. Sometimes we want to have people come from the tech industry and climate tech, and we send them to the groups in New York that exist for that. But this is just not, it is such a small group that we ensure that, you either work in advertising, you're in some form of strategy, not because we don't want you, but because we want to foster really niche and specific conversation. There's a purpose behind it all. So I think
so interesting, yeah, because I've been to gatherings that were bigger, and it's true the conversations, they are limited to, one part of the table, and you can't speak to everybody. So I love your concept of limiting the numbers to really have an in-depth conversation where everyone can participate. I think that's a great idea, yeah.
Thank you.
So, Freya, you have a background in journalism and business that led to a career in advertising agencies across the globe, and we can cite McCann, PI&C, Gray, or BBDO. I wanted to ask you, what has been your experience in the past when it comes to advertising and climate action? Was the impact on climate even considered when working with agencies and clients?
I've been in the industry for a decade. I think the interest has grown very much over the years. When I first came to the industry, I was so excited to use my skills to impact people, impacting people in communities or people that are with specific challenges that they experience. And the real impact, I think, has evolved over time to now mean for climate change. And I think agencies and clients are still navigating the space, but there are still many agencies that have sustainability offerings that have been very vocal about it. Our partner in London, AMV BBDO, launched the green consultancy offering recently. You have agencies like Accenture Song, Dentsu, McCann, and even, the helm of advertising, everyone that aspires to is win awards for their clients. And even Cannes Lions now and Effie's have had sustainability focused awards. So it's sort of, and we see this even with the RFIs that coming into the agency, which is request for RFPs, request for proposals. That's all coming through and asking about your sustainability sort of claims and commitments. So we see it infiltrate more and more these days, but I don't think anyone has quite cracked how to effectively incorporate sustainability and thinking into our systems and processes. And that's why I think personally, it's a really exciting space to be involved in and help find a solution for.
Yeah, that's great to have to hear from your experience about this, because in the past, I was working for a big brand and also with a trend agency, and sustainability would always come up as a trend, but more than a trend, because we knew that, you need to integrate it throughout all systems. But it was also really difficult at the time to find agencies, for example, who would be good at sustainability, or, who should you work with? And I suppose the offer now is going to grow and expand, which will make everything bigger. And as per our conversation earlier, the more it evolves and grows, the easier it's going to be to integrate it within everything that we do. We are not at that point yet, but it's certainly taking that direction, which is great. So I wanted to ask you, and I don't know if that's a relevant question, so let me know. I don't know if there has been a defining moment for you. Has there been a moment when you realized or decided that you would like to redirect your skills from upholding the statu quo to tackling the climate crisis?
It's a really good question, because it's not a simple answer, and that's why I like it. I don't think I reflected on and thought about what is one defining moment, and I don't think there is. I think it's been realizations over time and influences over time at a personal level. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
And when I think about who that is, I think about my climate circle attendees, my friends from there that are analyzing, 100 brands and their sustainability initiatives in 100 days. Super interesting stuff. And my partner, who is leading a major renewable energy project for offshore wind and bringing wind energy to New York. Huge, huge, huge project.
Yeah.
So seeing firsthand their challenges and their victories, it gives me confidence and definitely inspiration to dedicate the rest of my career to this and inspire, my colleagues, the agency leadership, these brands, our clients, to change the advertising industry. Like, I definitely believe we need to do better and be better for our planet, for sure.
Yeah.
And then, like, personal level, I think I'm a big, big believer in walking the talk when it comes to, every day as a strategist, I'm working to understand consumers. That's my job. And I'm a consumer. We're all consumers. I want to make sure that I can talk about the changes that I've made, right? Because otherwise, who am I to tell you to change? So the personal experience part of it is very important to me. And I've been dabbling in a lot over the years. But some of my proudest ones was I did for last year a no shop year. So absolutely no clothing, no jewelry, no shoes, nothing. Very
challenging, isn't it? I've done the same. It's very challenging, isn't it?
Challenging, but I think what was incredible to go through that process is to pick up, stop yourself. When, there's a party coming up and it's a flower themed, everyone's like, oh, what dress are you buying? No, I'm not. I'm going to find something in my wardrobe. When we had the Barbie party, oh, you got to wear pink. I don't own anything pink. I'm going to wear red and it's going to be okay.
It's a good one.
And the challenge is spurs from, and then I say, I'm doing this no shop year. And it's a way to spread the word about it. That was last year. I haven't stopped shopping entirely, but I've been more mindful going into it. Absolutely no fast fashion brands moving forward. But it's really hard to find sustainable stores, right? How do you know? I've been using an amazing website called goodonyou.eco. You type in the brand and it shows you the breakdown at no jargon, very simple language. Yeah. And that's been great for me. The apartment that I live in, everything is Facebook Marketplace secondhand, every single item. So it's, I think everyone's path looks really different. And when you come into contact, I think the important thing to note is being honest. Like, I still eat red meat. Like, I still need to compost. I fly often because my family lives in 3 different continents, and I think that's far from perfect, but being open about that stuff, we're not like these perfect environmentalists. I think what we need to encourage is doing things in our way that may be imperfect. I don't even know what a perfect environmentalist is. I couldn't tell you what that means. Yeah, exactly. But making all these behaviors, no matter how imperfect, but encouraging sustainability to not be a trend, to not be some buzzword, to become mainstream and drive this like real change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you cited so many great things. I think when you start, to pause and change the habits or the patterns, you become more mindful and conscious of how you shop yourself. Mm-hmm. And, I have definitely reduced like the number of fashion items I buy. I used to buy a lot in the past. And the past 2-3 years, it's been a lot less. I haven't stopped 100% like you. But I think you think about it and you start to watch your own patterns and why do I buy so much? Do I need so much? You start to question yourself. I had also this consideration with someone else on the podcast this week that, we need millions of people doing things imperfectly rather than perfectly. And then the third thought I'd like to bring in, because that's something I think about often, sometimes we point the finger at, people flying, for example, or flying often. But I always consider that, if all the industries in the world evolve to being greener, including the aviation industry, including cars, including, every sector, we will get there. And I don't really buy in the mindset of making people guilty because they are going to take a flight somewhere. But I prefer to look at the source. What can we do in the aviation industry to make it, greener? Because the ability of flying today is great. I don't want to do without it, I mean, if I can do without it, I will. And, I like other transportation means, but I think we also need to, again, expand our thinking because like you, last time I moved to a new flat, I actually needed to change quite a lot of things. And this is when I took the opportunity to relook at what I needed to buy and to look into sustainable options. Because obviously what is the most sustainable is to keep already what you have and to make good use of it, or buy second hand like you've done. But it's a way of thinking, and it's going at it with intentions and with what is available today. And as you said, you were looking at fashion sustainable options. They are growing. And obviously, we need not only fashion companies who create sustainable fashion, but also directories like the one you found, people organizing and structuring these things. And it takes everybody to get there. So thank you for these insights.
Yes, I love how we're both taking on at a very personal level, experiencing these changes, because then, they turn into conversations and it spreads. So it's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking back at the role of advertising, how powerful do you think advertising can be in driving real behavioral change for a sustainable world?
So I'll tackle this by very quickly talking about what I do as a brand strategist, just level setting. So very simply, a brand strategist's job is to shape human behavior. And we tap into people's psyche, into their values, try to figure out what they care about. And we use behavioral science and research tools that informs way we can move the needle on how we want to have them think, how we want to have them feel or do or take action. So our briefs, which is something, that we land on through doing insights around the consumer, the culture, the category, the brand, the competitive, all that stuff. It's a very thoroughly informed piece of output, which is the brief. The brief and the work has traditionally been about selling more things, right? Yeah. So very simply, we service our clients to sell more stuff. Yeah. And I think the power in what advertising can do, because we can drive behavioral change, we need to move from the buy more stuff to things like a low carbon lifestyle and doing campaigns that promote sustainable living. So creating demand for whether it's more climate friendly alternatives, plant-based foods, electric cars, composting, secondhand, reusable packaging, whatever it may be. And, it's easier said than done. I think the ideal is a client coming to you and saying, hey, look, we have a sustainability brief for you, help us. But more times than not right now is us having to be proactive and take the initiative to drive those conversations. And you may not have it front and center of your story and your campaign, but you can have it in the background. You can have people composting as part of the script. You can have these behaviors infused because the subconscious is a very strong thing too. If people see the behaviors, they want to do it more and more. There's many tools. There's many tools and ways I can talk about. Maybe one which is a behavioral tool called a nudge. So it uses these very subtle, influential techniques to try and get people to do the right thing without limiting their options, because people don't like that. Like you said, don't tell me to fly. Don't make me feel bad about flying. But for example, a restaurant can feature, a full all vegetarian menu, but also give customers the choice to add meat to their order. And when you do it like that, research shows that if you offer non-meat options as a default, most consumers will actually be more likely to choose them and stick to these climate-friendly options in the long run. So there's so much psychology behind this. It's just like bang smack in the world of advertising. It's what we do. But that's just one of many, many ways.
Yeah, that's fascinating. God, I need to have you again on the podcast. Love it. So, an important question, because I know you have been there and I've certainly been there as well, is about climate education. So when, like us, we have been working in the marketing, in the advertising industry for a long time, and probably climate was not at the top of the list with our clients or brands companies. But it wasn't also part of our curriculum at school. When it's a topic, obviously, that's becoming important and part of what we do as part of our jobs more and more. So would you say that we need to educate ourselves around the topic, perhaps even take new courses, new degrees, complementary education?
Yeah, I totally support this. I mean, firsthand experience of trying to do this. Within the advertising industry, you have clients wanting to make sure you have the credentials, right? Because why is someone in advertising advising me on sustainability? It's a very real problem, and I totally get it. So that's on one front. And then on a personal front, you want to be coming into these conversations with knowledge for sure, but you got to be smart about the way you approach it. So for me, self-education, that's the first one. There's an abundance of free courses out there. A lot of people in the industry in the sustainability space have done courses at Cambridge or Harvard, because now they're releasing courses of a focus on sustainability, marketing, media, creative. This did not exist even a few years ago. So they're developing these courses. And then there's trainings available. There's something called Change the Brief, which is an initiative out of the UK that will be expanding soon. But it's a training to equip you with the knowledge and the skills to have those conversations with clients and work on those sustainability briefs with confidence. There's a lot out there, but I'm in contradiction because I'm such a big believer of just learning on the job. But this is a little bit different. You need to do that, but also support yourself with some theory, because there will be a lot of naysayers and a lot of disbelievers, and you need to be able to ground it in simple facts, right? You can't argue with the facts and figures. So you have to be ready to have that in your back pocket.
Yeah, I would certainly agree that both are important. And as you said, there is so much education, online education is so accessible today. That's something you can tap into without even spending a single penny, right? I wasn't aware of the course you mentioned, so that's great that you cited it, because people can check it out. I've certainly looked at the programs of Cambridge and Oxford in the UK, because they both have really good ones. And I know a lot of people are looking into it. So yeah, I can only encourage people to check what they have where they are, but also online, obviously, it's accessible to everybody. So going back to your climate circles, I wanted to ask you, what is the general feedback you get from the brand strategists who take part to them? What is the most debated? What are the hottest topics of conversations?
I remember, I'll take you back to the first event, and it was during Climate Week. And it was funny because it wasn't me at the table. Someone else asked this question, which I was very thankful for. And they said, out of all the events happening at Climate Week, why did you all pick this one? Such a great question. And it was so like reassuring to hear a couple of things. They said, you know, I go to all these climate events and I'm just listening and listening and listening and listening, and there's no opportunity for me to share my thoughts. I just take it and I go away, and you know, that's it. And the other piece of it was that there are so many climate tech events out there, but every single climate tech event you go to, you're shaking your hand, you're meeting people, and you're like, what do you do? You know, and they have this jargon and terminology, and it's like, they too need our help with the communications piece of it, you know, really communicating very simply in layman's terms. What do you do? And they said that this event was very much for them. They haven't found something like this because no group exists where you have strategists and creative minds using creativity as a solution for climate. And then not speaking in jargon, you know, we do get into conversations about emissions and things like that, but it's put with our personal stories, you know, it's not just numbers in the air. So those are some of the reasons. And in terms of the hottest topics, I would say no brunch event is the same, because it's sometimes there are different people coming, sometimes they're the same, but it really is such a unique set of people every time. So the conversation varies. But you know, we usually talk about the hot commercials, the popular commercials, the Apple Watch at the time, Mother Nature. We looked at that. There was a lot of conversation around that. The Skims ad by Kim Kardashian, the ultimate nipple bra, that was a huge debate. And it's so funny, right? Because you get to hear these very real experiences and reactions. The knowledge of, we knowledge share a lot of resources, what people use for composting, clothing donation services. We exchange all of that information. And then we, of course, get lots of book suggestions. One that I'm yet to read is Joyful Militancy. And they shed groups like Carbonauts by Graham Hill. There's all this, it's resources as well. But of course, in addition to all of that, we're getting to hear firsthand what they're doing at their agency. So getting to understand what worked, what hasn't worked. And that usually gets quite heated because we are all quite frustrated. So we try to help each other out.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I really wanted to ask you this question because I think a lot of people are coming to the realization, you know, things have evolved so much in terms of how we interact with people. Obviously, there is social media, but usually it's through the window of your phone and it's not a direct interaction with people. I think there are a lot more conferences and speaker opportunities, which is great because you get to share your messages. But I love the format you've created because you are creating true one-on-one interaction with people, and even more because you mentioned you limit the numbers in your groups. And I find that so important also because we are talking about the importance of collaborating and collaborations. And being able to discuss these topics with people from your own industry, I find that absolutely essential because obviously you share, you know, the fun, but also examples of opportunities, challenges, things you see that spark ideas. And I think that's how you make an industry evolve as well, which is great.
Right. I think to that point, it's really scary to be, you know, I'm sure we've all felt the climate anxiety at certain points. And to think that you can sit in your little room and solve it yourself is extremely scary. And coming to have social connection as a way of moving forward together is just so comforting and inspiring for many people.
Yeah, comforting, I think, is a great word. So in terms of outcomes, since you started the climate circles last year, so Climate Week in New York City is in September, right? Okay, so it's been almost a year, let's say, because the new week is coming soon now. So have you seen these branches leading to being a catalyst for new ideas, for real action, for positive outcomes? Do you keep in touch together? Can you give us some insights into this?
Yes. At the end of every event, we get a recap email of all the resources that were mentioned. Everyone can connect, and some of us do keep in touch. But I will admit the action piece of it is something that I'm actively trying to work on, because we have these brunch events that happen with so much passion and energy. And I'm still trying to work out how we can translate that into action. I think it's a piece that is extremely important in trying to solve for, but I won't give away too much, but it's something we're working on.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's great. I mean, you need to start somewhere, and perhaps the ideas can come from other people as well. So there's this feedback from one of the Climate Circle's participants on your website, and it says, how do you stay true to your environmental values while working for an agency with clients who may not care about the environment as much as you do? I thought that was a great question. So I wanted to ask you, is it a dilemma you have experienced yourself? And perhaps what would be your advice to resolve it if you find yourself in this situation? Or how do you tackle it?
Yes, for sure. I relate to that. I think everyone interested in the space working in advertising can relate to it. It's a tough one, right? Like, you obviously, your environmental values are very personal, right? It's very different for each person. And sometimes the company that you work for is in misalignment. So that's essentially, how do you reconcile that gap? I think for me, the way I have personally navigated it is being really firm and not working on some things and having a really strong opinion about that. But while I have that boundary, working within my own world of doing what I can control. So finding, I think, people that can be responsive and supportive and eager to see you win and move forward and move this narrative at the agency is crucial. And finding avenues, you know, if you knock on someone's door in leadership and this is a low priority, you go to someone else and you knock on their window, you go to the back, you know, you have to be willing to navigate that. And it's really challenging, but I think the relationship piece of that is very important. Doubling down on the people piece of it, you know, the people in leadership that care about this will help you. You have to find ways to keep your fire alive, because there are weeks that my fire is dim and it's hard, but you find your own little ways. For me, I worked on a fashion brand that had established their ESG policy, and they came to us and they said, we want to do a consumer facing campaign for this. My dream brief. That made me feel really, really great. I just got put another client that is very much about purpose-driven, doing purpose-driven work. So that's another win for me. And it's never going to be perfect, right? I have two other clients that I work for, one a nonprofit. I've worked for big chocolate brands. It's variety, and you have to be realistic. You know, can chocolate be sustainable? Yes, but when it's biggest chocolate companies in the world, that's a little harder conversation to have. So small wins. In short, small wins.
Yeah, and you know, I was thinking, whenever we launch a new product or a new service, you know, you have this curve in marketing where you have the early adopters, and not everybody is going to be on the same phase, but little by little, you know, you can reach a peak when there will be more adopters of the ideas, obviously. So that leads me to my next question, which really links to it. So I'm always a bit shared on the question of working or not working with companies who might be seen or are seen as blatant polluters. We could cite, you know, Shell in the fuel industry or Shein in the fashion industry. Should we disengage from working with them? Should we accompany them towards more sustainable practices? And both viewpoints have arguments, of course. So what is your opinion?
This is a very controversial piece. I will say, like you already said, some people will have an opinion that advertising or PR agencies should not be working with fossil fuel clients. While that might be true, I think we're looking to change behaviors of even those that are responsible. So the mentality that, what is it? Keep your friends close and enemies closer in some ways. We want to stay close to them because the more change and influence we can have, otherwise they'll just continue on their ways and we'll create a divide. And what's the point in doing that? It's very simple. I clearly lean in the other way. We should keep them close and encourage them to think about their emissions and be that one knocking on the door consistently to make sure that they change. And I would hate to lose that thread.
Yeah, sometimes you need that Trojan horse as well, because I really understand one or the other. But, you know, to come back to initially when I said everything is connected, if you want to eliminate a massive part, you know, of industry, then you create a disconnect that, you know, it would be more beneficial, as you said, to accompany people. I think we should never forget that, you know, if they exist, it's because the demand is there. You know, we are talking of the fuel industry, but, you know, we still drive cars that need fuel every day to go to work or wherever. So we are all participants to it, even like Sheen, you know, discussed this with another guest recently. And, you know, if people were not buying their fast fashion, they wouldn't exist. So, yeah, that's definitely controversial, but an interesting conversation to have. Perhaps you can bring the topic up in your friend circle.
Yeah.
So regarding cultural differences, would you say that advertising and how we approach it in various countries looks different? So I'm tapping a little bit in your global experience. And would you say it matters to take into account cultural and geographical differences when we are now trying to incorporate climate consciousness more in this industry?
Yes, 100% yes. I think even across countries, if you think about the US, it's across states, across cities, between LA and New York, vastly different beliefs, behaviors, lifestyles. So we definitely need to be really hyper local when we're talking about anything related to the climate. You know, facts are great and the science is great, but we all need to bring it to the meaning of what is that for you in your day-to-day life. So you need to understand that to a certain degree. And I think, you know, it's not about showing the graphs of the rise in carbon dioxide or scary images or warnings, because it means different things to different people in different locations and different cultures. What, you know, their relationship even to the planet is very different in many different cultures. So you have to really answer, like, what does the path to 1.5 degrees of global warming mean to me in my day-to-day life? And again, the variety of things depends who you are, where you live, what you do for work, what you do for fun. So some examples might be, you know, in Germany, it could mean an increase in threat of devastating floods. In Switzerland, it could mean shorter ski seasons, something that they really care about. Yeah. So I think it's very important that we pay attention to those nuances when messaging. You just have to bring it home, just like anything, you know. The issues now, I think, once upon a time, it used to be, oh, it's someone else's problem, it's over there, and now it's very much at all, I can say at all our doorsteps. You know, it's really affecting everyone. So
yeah, I love that, Freya. I think that's really important to understand the local nuances, because people are not forcefully going to be impacted in the same way, but they are going to be impacted in some way, and you need to understand that for sure. So the next question, I really wanted to ask you this one because that's something people have told me often. So it is notorious that using dogs, cats, or sexiness in commercials often sparks viewers' emotions and results in increased market share, regardless of the actual marketing message. It is tactics that work. I've been told so many times that we need to make sustainability sexy if we want for it to grow and develop. So would you agree? And is it something you are considering as part of your advertising creative ideations?
This was a very fun question. It definitely made me laugh. I'm trying to find the alternative because the idea of making sustainability sexy, like what does that mean to begin with? And when you think of sexy, to your point, it's all about these cats and dogs, and it like becomes more of a trend. But I think it's about making sustainability mainstream in many ways. And I think mainstream and personal, like I think we just spoke about, making sure that it means something to me in my day-to-day life. I think we do that through tugging on those emotional heartstrings, telling stories, right? I think there's an incredible experiment that comes to mind when I think about this, which is when people are raising money for donations, they are the amount that they donate doubles when the storytelling is not with numbers about malnutrition, but it is a story, a single story of a girl in Rwanda suffering from malnutrition. The amount of money that they donate doubles. And so when I think about that, it's, I wouldn't think of that as sexy. I would just think about that as, yeah, like meaningful to you, you know, told through a single story. A story that can resonate with you. You see yourself in the ads. That's like the dream, right? That's like the dream for an advertiser, to make sure that the consumer
Yeah, you resonate with it. Yeah, and identify with it.
Understood. Yeah. So I don't know how I feel about the sexy thing, and I'll have to get back to you on an alternative.
No. Obviously, it's because it creates an impact in people today. But I love that you are linking back to storytelling because we know how powerful that is. And, you know, you work in advertising, so we need to be creative with the storytelling, obviously, and understand what does work. And I love your example that you've just given. So to dive a little bit deeper into that, and perhaps for you to give us some more example, obviously, we know that creativity yields a lot of power, and there are many of us who are trying to figure out the best way to unleash it in the climate action space. Have you figured out some ways that work really well, and can you share some with us? So obviously, you've already given us one that I think resonates.
Yeah, and I think creativity, do you mean sort of a creative-minded individual, or specifically from advertising?
Yeah, specifically from advertising, are there any creatives that you see working better to create an impact?
Oh, yeah.
Your response.
For sure. I think there are some standout brands that do incredible pieces of work around sustainability. Some of the brands that stick out to me are IKEA, Allbirds, Patagonia. It's like their action, no matter what the ad looks like, the action from the CEO or from their leadership really makes a difference. Because I think success for creativity when it comes to sustainability, the KPIs look different. So KPIs, the key performance indicators of what success is for that campaign, looks different. Usually it's about selling more things, like we spoke about, or brand awareness, click-through rates, you know, there's all this. But when we think about sustainability, it's a new form of measurement. And I think some brands have done a really, really great job at getting there.
Yeah.
One other example, personal example, I was shopping in West Village and I came across a brand called Nisolo, a shoe brand. And what was fascinating was that at every touch point, tactile, you know, the card you get in your shoebox, I look at it and just like you have on the back of a food packet, you know, they have the breakdowns of the sugar levels, sodium. This had the breakdown of everything that went into it and the labor and the people and the planet and all the impacts. But the look and feel of it was very much like a food label. And I just thought that was so brilliant. It's, again, making something so familiar, something we're so familiar with, and using that to connect and relate to people.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice, to look into brands that are successful in that space, see what they do, see what resonates with people. And I'll certainly aim to have some of these brands on the podcast in the future, because they don't all act in the same way. You know, every brand is different, obviously, but that's great to learn from each one of them and see what can resonate with you. So Freya, you have officially become the BBDO representative for Ad Net Zero US. Can you tell us what these two organizations are, so that people know that? And especially for Ad Net Zero US, because I discovered it through you, I have to be honest, and I think it's a wonderful organization with a great mission. So can you tell us about it?
Yes, for sure. So I am a brand planner at BBDO. This is my full-time job. BBDO was one of my top 3 agencies when I moved to New York. So it feels good to finally be here and made it. The highest level of leadership and creative minds are here. BBDO is a global full-service marketing communication agency network. And their belief is in the power of creativity to move people, to move brands, and to move businesses. We've been around for 132 years, really long time. And we always strive to be like the most creative, the most effective, the most awarded agency in the world. So that's BBDO. Outside of work, I had been working with Ad Net Zero to help them change the advertising industry. And I thought, why not bring the two worlds together? So I officially took the title of being BBDO New York's representative for Ad Net Zero in the US. And Ad Net Zero is a climate action program, and it's an umbrella organization. So they lead the way on sustainability when trying to establish any best practices for the advertising industry. They launched in the UK in 2020. And they have what they call a 5-point action plan. And it is to achieve net zero emissions from ad development to production to media placement and behavioral change stages. And it runs the gamut. And what's super unique about them is that they're not reinventing the wheel, because there's very much a lot of different agencies that and organizations that have solutions. So they're the only ones that bring together everything from, like I said, ideation to production and optimization. It's pretty incredible. So they expanded to the US a couple of years ago, and it's led with an incredibly thoughtful and determined leader, John Osborne. He actually was the CEO of BBDO many years ago. So there's great overlap there. So yeah, we work with Ad Net Zero and BBDO to come up with solutions, initiatives. We have access to the different industry trade bodies. We're working with the brands, the agencies, the media partners, production partners, and they currently have over 250 companies involved.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. It's so great to see a body like this existing in your industry. I wasn't even aware of it. but I think that's why it's important to raise awareness of it. So I wanted to ask you, how can people join Ad Net Zero US if they want to, and what are the commitments if they do?
So as long as a company is just serious about getting their sustainability journey and putting measurement and emissions reductions targets in place, within the first year of them joining, all are welcome. So they provide training, resources to help companies along their journey. And some who join are really advanced, right? They've got this robust sort of targets in place, but others are just starting. So they really deal with both ends of the spectrum. And right now they're based in the UK and the US. So you can really reach out to the team at atnetzero.com and they'll put you in touch with someone who can help. From an individual level, the reason I got involved actually, it was for Ad Week, and Ad Net Zero was hosting a panel and they wanted to have people from the advertising industry there. And I was very excited, and John Osborne reached out immediately. So from a personal level, I got involved in helping them through that way.
Amazing. So, as you mentioned, some of the most important missions of At Net Zero US are to reduce emissions from business operations, advertising production, media planning and buying, events, and also harness the advertising's power to support behavior change, as we discussed previously. So I wanted to ask you, could you give us a concrete example of a project you have led or been involved in that has had a big impact in one or more of these areas, just to make it more real for people who are listening?
Yeah, at a higher level, Ad Net Zero have had a lot of really big initiatives lately that they've launched, which was awesome to see. Especially they launched something in the measurement and emission reductions for specifically production and creative and media. And it's something called the new Global Media Sustainability Framework. So you guys can all check it out. It's a really great tool. But for me personally, the one area that I lead the charge on is their Action 5, which is focused on advertising's superpower of influencing norms and behavior. So that's very much up my alley and a lot of what we've been talking about today. But very concretely speaking, we're convening together in discussion groups to develop a tool that normalizes sustainable behavior at an individual level. And we are working with Dr. Bill Westcott and a lot of other well-established figures in the space to identify meaningful behaviors that can actually reduce emissions. So we want to turn that eventually into a tool for agencies and creatives to use and understand, okay, great, you have an interest in incorporating sustainability into your work. Here's how you can get started. And here are some behaviors that you can actually start to move the needle on that will make a big impact. Because, you know, there's definitely varying degrees of taking action. Some have a greater impact than others. And so we want to focus on those ones that are really changing behavior, changing planet.
Yeah, definitely. Amazing. Thank you for sharing this with us. You mentioned this earlier, and I wanted to ask you on the podcast to share this again with people who are listening. But are you aware of other similar concepts to climate circles in other cities or other countries who are more tackling the advertising industry, or resources that you could share with us for people who are not in New York? Obviously, if they are in New York, they can be in touch with you. Anything you could share with us?
Yes, there is many different organizations that aren't at this intimate level, but they have definitely a bigger, broader reach. One of them being Creatives for Climate. They have about 40,000 creatives in 50 countries. So that's a very big scale. They have workshops, anti-greenwashing workshops, and a lot of resources, a hub where you can connect with people, but that is very, very global. You've got Women and Climate. They also have about 50 local chapters around the world. They want to inspire more women to get started on their climate journey. I had attended one of their events during Climate Week last year, which was understanding how to talk about your carbon footprint, and how to understand emissions. And it was a really great event. So I know them through that. Another one in the UK is Purpose Disruptors. They're pretty much a network of advertisers working to reshape our industry to tackle climate change. And they host amazing events, and they do a lot of open briefs, which allow you to get involved. So they did one that's like the good life of 2030. What does that mean? What does that look like? So they took submissions from many different agencies. And then lastly, this is actually in New York, Clean Creatives, but it is a project for PR and advertising professionals who want to pledge to not work with fossil fuel clients. So they take the other perspective. Very strong presence and tactics that they use. So those are some of the groups, but I would encourage people around the world to look at their local events page and just type up climate events. You know, a lot of Slack channels are a great resource, and word of mouth. I think that's always the best one.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's great. Great avenues. I will definitely check some of them myself.
Please do.
For this. Yeah. So because we are nearing the end of the podcast, quite a generic question, but to give you also the opportunity to perhaps give some more messages. In terms of driving momentum, how can we bring more companies on board, more agencies on board? And perhaps we need to ask ourselves the question, what would be the benefits for them? Because we always know that to make people move, they need to see what's the value for them, right?
That's right. Everyone has their interests in mind. So whether you're talking about the agency, the client, or even at a governmental level, like we need all of those working together. And what can we do sitting in the advertising industry to influence all of that? I think for agencies, we're very much in the business of serving our clients. So that demand really comes from them. And there's only so much we can do to encourage this sustainability thinking. When we think of the clients, it is very much engaging in the C-suite level and their needs to believe that behavior change can have an impact on this. And they need to be eager about it. And they need to understand it's not about selling less things. It's, you know, not being part of the green hushing, which is like you're doing great stuff and you're too scared to talk about it. But understanding those leaders that know that it's good for business, people, planet, you know, and it's all supported by data. It's not something that you have to convince on your own. You root it in, I always say, root it in the facts and figures. And I think the selling point for the client is that, you know, and there's only so much you can influence. You can definitely bring up the conversation and theory, but they need to meet you halfway. It's always a partnership. So there's that. And we drive demand, like I said at the start, like we really are the ones dictating that and shaping it. So it's from a personal level, you know, these companies like Shein wouldn't have to produce, like you said, right? All these clothes, if we're not buying it, if we just boycott it, they won't exist. It's a simpler said than done. And then from the government policy level, I think in the UK, they're leading charge, and I think it's very much going to trickle over to the US eventually, but they're starting to mandate some really harsh rules around what ads can say. So we need to be educated and ready, and I think the change is coming.
Yeah, I love that you've approached that both from a top-down and ground-up approach, because we definitely need both. And yeah, we'll definitely meet halfway, as you said. So that's great. Thank you. So two more personal questions to finish. The first one, going back to your upbringing by the ocean, and I will not even try to pronounce the place. But obviously, you grew up by the ocean, and then you made a big career move to the Big Apple. Do you think it has perhaps given you a special outlook when it comes to rally the advertising world to protecting nature and taking climate action?
Yeah, I think the upbringing in New Zealand, Auckland, you can say Auckland, New Zealand, was such a different lifestyle, and the values were so tied to nature, the respect and the love that the people have, because it's rooted in the culture, in the Maori culture and the heritage. It's very much that. You know, when I think about the two places, New Zealand has a population of 5 million and the US has 330 million. Very, very different. But, you know, the topic of climate change in the US, I would say, is very controversial at times and political. And so it isn't using climate change, but it's using, you know, language like clean air, fresh air. Who doesn't want that? You know, more trees. Who doesn't want that? So it's different. I think the relationship of the two places and what they have in terms of their relationship with nature is very different. So you have to understand that. And I think because I've been so lucky to have the exposure to both, and don't get me started on throwing Dubai into the mix, but that is also a different ball game. But from where I stand, I'm such a beach lover. I'm such a nature lover, and I thank New Zealand for that. But it does definitely sway my perspective and like where my heart lies. It's that respect and love, just like New Zealanders have for their land. It's like, I hope we can bring that here too.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I always love, to see cultural differences, and that's great to hear from you about, the difference with the US, because I can see these differences between Europe and the US because I also work with people there. And it's true, the perceptions are not the same, but I love to hear you talking about the language that can resonate better as well. That's really interesting. I was also asking you the question because, I grew up in France, in the countryside, with a dad who has a background as a botanist. So I was very in touch with nature, and, that was my own upbringing. And today I live in a big city in London, in the UK. And I can see, how my own background is playing a role, because I've always been interested in, our planet, the environment, wildlife, etc. And, I've been in touch with people who have had an upbringing in the city, and I've always been in the city, and their perspective is very different. And, it's been part of our conversation together today. We need to understand and see these differences, because it's true, the language is not the same. And everybody has a role to play. More and more people are going to live in urban environments, for example, and bringing more greenery, more nature consciousness into the city matters as well. And everybody has a role in that. So thank you for your insights on this. That was really interesting. So last question, and I always end this podcast with the same question to know more about each guest for a different angle. If you were a color, what would it be and why?
Love this question. I don't want to be cliche and say green because that's associated.
Nobody has ever said green on the podcast, so that's not cliche.
I'm not going with green, not the expected one. If I were a color, I would definitely be blue. And it's because I'm such an ocean baby, being by the water, growing up, to your point about upbringing, like swimming, and now I'm surfing and scuba diving. I even played underwater hockey for many years in New Zealand. You have to Google that.
Okay, what is
It's hard to describe, but I think water like signifies so much. It can be still, it can be powerful and flexible. And I think it's a really good reminder of how we need to navigate doing this. You know, you can't be too rigid and in your ways. You have to make sure that you're sort of not trapped in this mindset, but being really open. You know, there's going to be a lot that we need to do to get this done, but I look forward to spending the rest of my career trying to make it happen.
That's great. Great messages. Absolutely love the reasons behind your choice. And I would say a lot of people, actually, a lot of guests on the podcast have cited blue for the same reason. And it shows how much people are in touch with the ocean. And that's great to see because we are a blue planet. And we definitely need to listen to this sensitivity of the ocean. So thank you so much, Freya. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your insights about the advertising industry and what we can do in that space. And thank you especially for what you've started in New York City. I hope it inspires other people to do the same in other cities. And I'm sure they will be inspired by the conversation and the discussion we had with you today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. I really appreciate it. We need to see more advertisers talking about this because we have a lot of power that we're sitting on, and I look forward for it to be unleashed in the many years to come.
Yeah. So good luck for Climate Week because it's gonna come soon. It's in just over a month now. And thank you to everyone for watching and listening today.
Thank you so much.